pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the September meeting of the Irondequoit Zoning Board of Appeals. Before we get underway, there's a few administrative details I'd like to bring to your attention. First, the fire exit is located to your left. In the event of a fire, you will be notified by an announcement. If notified, please move in a calm and orderly fashion to the exit using either the north or the south stairs to leave the building. The minutes are being recorded by our secretary for the purpose of a record and minutes, not as a verbatim transcript. So please identify yourself each and every time that you come to the podium and speak into the microphone so that it gets picked up clearly on the recording. We will follow the items in the order that they appear on our agenda. Extra copies of the agenda are located on the table next to the door into the hearing room. When we call a case, we'd ask that the applicant or their representative come to the podium, state their name and their address. At that point, they need to take a break, raise their right hand, we'll swear them in, and then they can present their case. During the applicant's presentation of the case, members of the board may have questions or comments. When all of that interchange is completed, we'll then open it up to public input. There are three categories of public input that have evolved. Traditionally there are two, but here there are three now, and we're open to other suggestions. The first category of public input, and by the way, you're only allowed to speak during one of those sections of public input. The first section is those who wish to speak in favor of the application. Ask you to line up along the wall and come to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us what you have to tell us that supports the application. Then we'll take those who are opposed to the application. Same process, line up along the wall, come up to the podium one at a time, give us your name and address, and then tell us why you're opposed to the application. And then the category that's evolved from people who've been here in the past, those who aren't for it, they're not against it, they just want to talk about it with us. Line up against the wall, come to the podium, give us your name, address, tell us what you'd like to tell us. And then when that process is all completed, the applicant and their representative have the opportunity to return to the podium and address any comments that came up during the public input portion. Again, there may be questions from the board. Once all that is done, the case is then closed. We'll move on to the next case. When all of the cases have been heard, we will then take a brief break. The length and timing of that will be announced at the time we take it, which is when it'll be determined. And after we come back from the break, we will then deliberate on the cases in the order that they appear on the agenda and for which applicants or their representatives are still present. So if the first applicant has left and the second applicant is present, we would call the second case first and then go down the agenda for the applicants who are present. Then when we've completed the cases for those applicants who remain present, we then go back to the top when nobody else is, the other applicants aren't here, and take those cases until we finish all of the cases. No input is allowed during the portion of the meeting after the break. You're welcome to stay and listen if you'd like, but there's no additional input. If you wish to leave and you're curious as to what our decision was, you can call the Zoning and Planning Department tomorrow after 9 a.m. Or you can watch it on television if you have cable. All right, so we will call our first case on the agenda.
ZB 1509-1, upon matter of request by Kenneth and Susan Fisher for an area variance to install 6-foot-high fence exceeding maximum permitted height and with less than required setback on a through lot on premises 26 North Terrace in an R2 residential district.
We have our house, the back.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Your name and address first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Susan,
all right.
Susan Fisher, 26 North Terrace.
All right. If you raise your right hand, you swear or affirm that everything you say tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Now we're set.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we have a chain link fence in the back of our yard that's overgrown with euonymus, and behind that is an overgrown bank that drops down pretty quickly onto McMaster's Alley that we cut down the hawthorn trees every year, but they grow back, so we need to dig them out. And in order to dig out the stumps, we really need to get rid of the chain link fence that's there, really clear out the whole thing, so we can make a permanent solution to this stuff that keeps growing. But when we get rid of all the brush, then we'll have no privacy looking over into McMaster's Alley. The level of their windows, their second story, is even with our first floor, because it's a drop. So it's not a typical through lot. It's not, the people on the other side, on McMaster's, only have houses on the St. Paul side of the street. So it shouldn't really make any difference to anybody, just to be a lot cleaner and nicer. And the people at number 5359 and 5339, who I talked to, are very anxious for me to go ahead with this.
Okay, because they're going to get a benefit from it too, I
Yes.
suspect.
So,
Anybody have any questions?
That particular street is more like an alley.
yes,
It is the backyard to both your house, and it's also the backyard to the houses that face St. Paul Boulevard, if I'm correct.
yeah, except that their backyards end, and then there's the alley.
Right, they don't have much,
No, they really don't have yards. They have little driveways.
they have like front yards.
Yes,
on-
front
on
yards
St.
facing
Paul
St. Paul,
Boulevard.
right?
Right, so in effect, it's two backyards with a driveway down through it,
Basically,
or an alley down through it. So even though it's considered a front yard for you, it's really not a front yard. It's like your lot, it technically shows two front yards. Is that how it's?
Well, yeah, the town code calls it two fronts, because it
Right.
fronts two streets.
But
That's why she has to do this, because it's not a backyard.
right.
Yeah.
So, any of the homes along the alley that face the boulevard, you said one person said everything's okay.
Two homestead.
Are they the ones
But they're
directly across from where the fence is going to be?
Yeah, but actually they both are. They both
Okay. I mean,
kind of like in
it-
between.
to me, it sounds like a good idea. So I've been down that street. It's it is more of an alley than it is a residential street, I would think. But okay.
I have to confess that I thought I knew every nook and cranny in this town. This was a new one on me. And we had a variance on your street, but on the other side. Because I was on the other side, I never looked on your side.
Right.
I looked this time, and I drove down McMaster's Alley too, which I never knew existed. And I can understand exactly why you are requesting this variance. I think it'll be, in my opinion, it sounds like it'll be a benefit to everybody in the area. I don't know if you've had any opposition from any of the neighbors, but I would be very surprised.
Yeah, I have not.
I think it'd be a big improvement. So without giving away how I'm going to vote, I just found the whole trip to be very interesting.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone who'd like to talk about it with us? All right, then we'll close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case, ZB 1509-2. Upon the matter of request by David Lindman for an area variance to park a commercial bucket-type service truck on premises 129 Twilight Drive in an R1 residential district.
Good evening. My name is David Lyman, 129 Twilight Drive.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that everything you say tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So this is an application that's generated by Time Warner Cable wanting you to have their truck in your driveway so that you can respond to their situations when they want you to be able to respond without having you to go somewhere that they could store the truck.
Yes, sir.
And we've had lots of these in the past.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight, Mr. Hinman, fellow members of the board. Basically, this would allow us to accelerate and hasten our response time to outages anywhere in the system that I may be assigned to work, and that is rotational. So there's no set schedule to that. Sometimes the on-call is Monday through Wednesday. Sometimes the on-call is on a weekend only. It's on a rotational basis. So that's part of the reason for the application, so that we would have the ability to have the truck at home and respond quickly no matter what time of year or no matter what day of the month.
And generally, you respond in this rough geographical area,
Yes, sir.
and that's why they want the truck here.
In the general Rochester vicinity, but sometimes it's as far out as Batavia area, wherever we have a footprint around the Rochester system.
In the past, we've approved variances in these situations with conditions to minimize the impact upon the neighbors. When you back this truck up, it beeps, right?
There is a backup beeper. As a practice, though, I've always made a point of coasting the truck down my driveway in neutral so as not to annoy everyone with that beeper. My driveway is pitched in such a way that in most cases I can put it in neutral and coast down, obviously while backing up very carefully to make sure there are no pedestrians or cars coming. But if I have to respond at 2 a.m., I make a point of not sounding the backup beeper unless it's stuck in a snowdrift, caused by a plow-in or something like that. So as a practice, I try to be discreet about it and consider it as much as possible.
Well, one of the conditions that we've imposed on other situations like this is that the truck get backed in
Mhm.
when you come home at the end of the day.
Right.
The normal, that it's backed in so the beeper is going off when people are awake and it's not bothering them, so that when you pull out, if you need to pull out when you're on call during the night, the beeper isn't activated, and that when you return, you then pull in so that the beeper's not activated, so that you are backing up with the beeper during the hours. Is that something that would be acceptable to you?
Absolutely. What I had done as a practice is 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
It would just one more step would be to back it in when I first come home. But yeah.
Also, by backing it in, the bucket and the end that looks less normal and less residential is more out of view. Particularly, I think it would be hidden if anyone going south, as I frequently do, it would be hidden from the front, by the front of your house, right?
I provided the board with a photo in the packet of how it would typically look pulled in if anyone had a question.
If you were unable to park at home, do you have a plan B in mind?
Yes, Plan B is to park it at a Time Warner facility in Gates, which adds to our response time. And part of what our system as a whole is graded on, not just individual performance numbers or anything like that, but the FCC actually keeps track of a lot of our outage restoration averages, things like that. So the more time that's added to our response, it adds up and it accumulates and brings those averages down. From a business standpoint, they like to try to keep those customer satisfaction numbers as high as possible and reduce those response times whenever possible. As we know, people don't just watch TV anymore. Probably a good majority of what our service offers is high-speed internet, and people actually depend on that, including our business class customers. And I'm responsible for plant maintenance, which encompasses business class, residential, everything else. So in order to restore those critical services, telephone, internet, commercial, business class internet, things like that, we try to get out there as quickly as possible for anyone that subscribes.
So Time Warner really doesn't have a crew like RG&E would have that's, probably 3 different shifts so that they can just cover?
No,
So it depends on you guys whenever your coverage to go out.
right. We have a rotational on-call list, and it's not as extensive as an RG&E call-out list, let's say. they tend to show up in larger crews because of the nature of their business is a little more dangerous, high voltage and so on and so forth. Safety's paramount. Safety's important to us too, but typically it doesn't take 3 guys to restore service every single time. So as a practice, they assign 1 guy per area. So
I just want to clarify my understanding that it seems as though that this is here because of a violation. Is that correct? So that means that somebody is not happy with it, right?
It was a violation. Yeah.
I think that was mainly driven by the fact that I had a large mulch pile in front of the garage after having some trees removed. And I worked diligently to try to get that mulch pile worked down and spread out back, but it didn't happen in a week. So I had the truck parked down closer to the sidewalk than it normally would be. So apparently that pushed someone over the edge with their tolerance of the view, so to speak.
Well, this is the second Time Warner one since I've been on the board, and we made some exceptions on the first one, but that's I don't know. I don't believe this truck. I think this truck is bigger than the last one. I'm not 100% sure, but the problem I have is Time Warner, being a business, is subjecting you, the worker, to have us, the town, make an exception for commercial vehicles parked in a residential area. And the response by you and Time Warner is the fact that it's due to your quick response times and doing your job properly.
Mhm.
But that's a problem more for Time Warner than it is for the town of Arundequite. In reference to, and the last fella, and maybe the cat's out of the bag now, but the last fella had mentioned that he takes care of the local area and he wants to be the first guy to respond to make it a quick repair. And you have said you go as far as Batavia and wherever, you go all around wherever you're needed. In my opinion, if convenience and quickness is the thing, Time Warner should be renting a spot for these trucks to be parked so that you can shoot over in 5 minutes, in a commercial area and swap out trucks and go, or swap out your personal car to a truck and leave, as opposed to going all the way to Gates to pick it up. You're asking the town, and again, you're asking the town to make an exception for your convenience and their customer satisfaction monitoring, or the FCC, whoever monitors your response time. That shouldn't be an inconvenience of your neighbors. Now, I understand some of your neighbors are okay with it, but that's a big truck to be parked in a residential spot. And again, we did make an exception once before, but my worry is that if you get it and another Time Warner employee that's got a big truck wants one, and another one, and another one, before you know it, all the Time Warner employees that live in the town of Arundequite will have a truck in their yard. And I worry about that, especially the size of that truck. It's not just a van, it's a bucket truck, and a good-sized bucket truck at that. So like Russ said, I'm not giving away the way I want to vote, but I think the convenience aspect of it is Time Warner's problem, not necessarily 100% your problem, but Time Warner's problem. I just...
And I would ask, to follow that point, you referenced the FCC recording things. How does the FCC's recording response times impact you as a property owner in the town of Arundequite?
I don't know how I can answer that question. I mean, it's obviously not going to affect a resident directly.
You're asking for the variance, so you cited that as one of the reasons why you believe
I'm asking for the variance because
this variance. So again, why is that relevant to the burden on you, as opposed to a corporation that's in business to make money?
No, what it was relevant to was the reason for having the truck at home. That was just to support to explain the reason for having to have the truck readily at hand. One of the reasons that the company strives for quicker response times. That was my only point.
But that's purely for the company.
It wasn't to imply that that benefits my neighbors in any way or harms my neighbors in any way.
But that's purely for the company. It doesn't seem like that's a hardship on you as an owner of property in the town of Arundequoit. That seems to be something to benefit your company, your employer. I'm just trying to understand how that issue is relevant to owning property in Arundequoit. And it seems to me that...
I never tried to assimilate the two. I never tried to say that they were correlated.
Okay.
No, but from our standpoint, we're being asked to grant a variance that affects property in Arundequoit, that essentially what we're being asked to do is grant you this variance, as I mentioned, we've granted others, to benefit Time Warner. And it's bothered me in the past, is exactly what Mike brought up, about we're being asked to vary our rules so to spare Time Warner having to make arrangements to have a place to store this. But you do respond to Arundequoit calls, right?
Yes, and I have.
So if there's an outage here and you're on call, you're responding to take care of it. It's just you can go as far as Batavia if there's a problem there. You might go to Gates if there's a problem there. You could be down in Geneseo if there's a problem there.
Yes, sir.
But you take care of Arundequoit.
My primary area of responsibility, to answer your question, is Riga and Chili and parts of Churchville, or actually all of Churchville, from day to day. But from an outage standpoint, that all changes. From an on-call coverage standpoint, that all changes. Now you respond to where the company needs you.
Right. So if there's an Arundequoit problem and you're in Arundequoit, they're going to call you and say, get over there and take care of it.
Yes, sir, if I'm on that
If you're
on-call schedule.
On call.
It's wherever they need me to go, in other words.
Right.
Within reason. They're not gonna send us to Watertown. But,
Your daily route is Riga, Chili, Churchville?
yes, sir.
So
For now, but that changes with the needs of the company as
again,
well.
There's places to rent storage property for vehicles, for commercial vehicles, up on Ridge Road East. And again, for Time Warner to rent you a spot to have your truck there and be able to swap out your car close to home, somewhere close to your house, what makes it convenient so you can get in and out of there and go. As opposed to having it parked in your driveway again.
But I don't think
I
the
could
issue
ask-
is that Time Warner doesn't want to pay the money to store the vehicle anywhere. I think the issue is just trying to receive official permission to park the vehicle at home the way many commercial companies have around this town already.
I have a question for council. If we grant this variance, then anyone else who owns this property can park a similar vehicle of similar size and dimensions in that driveway. Is that correct? So that runs with the land forever.
Right. The variance would run with the land. You could put particular conditions on it that could minimize that, but the general rule is that, yes, the variance runs with the land. You could condition it otherwise, but if the next applicant were to have, the same rationale, you would have to show a distinction as to why you're not being arbitrary to say that this gentleman can park, his vehicle in the driveway, but the next guy can't.
So if someone down the street wanted to park a plumbing truck to make sure that people can get their water service as quickly as possible, and we were to grant this variance, it would seem that we would have to grant that variance as well.
So it's a tricky balance with, whether or not the issuance of any variance is setting unfavorable precedent. This board looks at every application independently on its own merit. So theoretically, if another resident of the town had the exact same rationale, then yes, it would be arbitrary for the board, if another applicant was in the exact same circumstances with the exact same rationale, to vote differently. However, I assume there would be at least some differences in why, one applicant over another is looking for a variance. But you're right. In general, this board, the duty of this board is to, not necessarily just whether or not it's a matter of convenience or may make sense. There are, the standards that the board is supposed to weigh, and, the overarching sort of consideration is, the hardship that the applicant is suffering and how that balances against, potential harm in allowing a variance from the restrictions under the code.
In the past, during the time I've been on the board, I can recall at least 3 of these. I think two were for Time Warner. I think one was for the phone company, or it may have been two for the phone company, one for Time Warner. They've all involved this kind of truck with a bucket. And what we've done is we've limited, as I recall, we've conditioned the variance on being only for a limited period of time. And we've indicated that we've put restrictions on, as I mentioned, about backing in and that, because, but, I mean, we've accommodated, we've struck a balance, and there've been one or two of those. There was opposition by a neighbor who didn't want the truck close to a window in his house, so we required the applicant to park it on the other side of the driveway so that it didn't interfere with the window, and we've made conditions like that to accommodate the particular situation. That's why I mentioned to him, because I go by his driveway every morning on my way downtown. And that's why I said if he backs it in, it's not going to be really that noticeable, because the front of his house juts out a little and the bucket would be parked, so it would be blocked from the front of the house for anyone who's going south. And from the north side, it's on the, usually parks it on the side that's closest to the house, so it wouldn't be as visible. And the neighbors are, indicating here that they're okay with that. But my concern is I'd like to see the
Somebody
town,
must have complained about it,
well, but not necessarily, the town, in the course of going through and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the course of traveling around the town, if somebody from the town saw something that didn't seem quite amiss, and they checked, they would see that, and then that it could start the process. Is that right?
I'd like to also point, that's correct. What I also like to say is that not all trucks, commercial trucks, are illegal in commercial areas. In this application, they wrote down the town's code. Some trucks are fine. Bucket trucks aren't. That's why they're there. But some, like you said, the plumbing truck, it might be legal. Yeah, they're not all illegal.
it had something to do with the size and the height.
Yeah, and in fact, he wrote down our code right here for overall height. It's code allows 90 inches, the width 96, length 240. So if you have a truck that way, you don't need a variance. You can do that in a residential district.
Right, even if it's a bucket truck.
No, bucket trucks, actually,
Hi.
yeah. You're right, we don't have bucket trucks listed on just not allowed. Step truck, step vans.
Because I think there have been situations where people have come in and they've pointed out other trucks that haven't violated, that they're smaller ones. Or if they were a few inches, maybe not too far over but as I recall from he's under the overall height. He's 2 inches over he's 30 inches above the height. He's 2 inches under the width, and he's under the length that's allowed. So it's simply a matter of the height of the truck, not the width or the length. So he's not parking some monster truck. And sometimes people just drive by and see these things. I know I talked to Donna about a tractor-trailer truck that I saw parked on a driveway one day that was parked there for several days when I was looking at another application. So
When I went to,
there's certain specific trucks, like I know dump trucks, not allowed anywhere.
when I went to view the property, I know I was specifically looking to see if there was an opportunity to park the vehicle behind the foundation line of the house so that it wasn't in the sight line. But it doesn't look like that's feasible at all unless I miss something.
No, sir.
How many nights a week do you have the truck at home?
Prior to the violation order, it was nightly. We had truck take homes, so even on nights when you're not on call, as a benefit, we were allowed to take it home. So that went on for years. That's why this caught me by surprise, honestly, sir.
But when you say nightly, are we saying 7 days a week?
Yes, sir.
But you only are on call a certain number of nights a week, right?
Correct.
And if I understood you correctly, during the daytime, your primary area right now is Churchville, Riga, and where?
Ogden, parts of Ogden.
Ogden. Right? And you said that if you weren't allowed to park it in your driveway, you would have to go to Gates to pick it up, right?
Yes, sir.
But Gates is like right in the neighborhood of Ogden, Churchville, and Riga. So if we were to limit it to those occasions when you're on call and need to have the truck available, would that work for you?
The only hardship to that, sir, would be if they move my area, which has happened probably 5 times since I've been in the department. I've been with this department for over 10 years, and they do move areas as needed. So the fact that I'm in Chilai or Riga right now is actually subject to change.
But
If I work in the city or if I work anywhere south of the system, let's say, Gates would then become out of my way.
Right, but
To answer your question.
if I'm understanding correctly, that may change like every year or two.
It could change as the company needs it. It could change every few months. There's no rhyme or reason to it. The number of factors. If people move on, people move up. Guys leave, change areas, what have you. Sometimes they mix things up. If you need to be moved to an area to help get things in order, they might move you over to a different area for a while. It truly is the needs of the business. The service levels fluctuate. It's to help try to respond to that.
Because one of the thoughts that I've had in the past is that, I'm sure Arundecoit isn't the only municipality in the county that has a restriction that's similar to this. So it can't be that Arundecoit's the only town that, Time Warner has this issue with. The impression I get is that Time Warner basically says, well, that's an issue for the employee and we don't care. Now, that could be wrong, but it would seem to me that if this is a situation that's important to the company, as you suggest, that the company would have somebody contacting the town, not only the town of Arundecoit, but Webster, Penfield, Greece, all the towns, to say, look, this is something that we have a need for, and you have restrictions that are imposed on our employees that create a problem. Can we work together to arrive at a solution that benefits everyone? I mean, if, for example, if Time Warner needs 3 trucks available in town to have available to cover outages in the town, that they might be able to work something out with the town where there's a place that they could park 3 trucks that would be accessible to their employees, or they could work something out with them. But what it seems to me they're doing is that, and it's the phone companies the same way, they're leaving it up to you to say, well, you deal with the town and let us know how you make out.
Well, sir, I can only say that I know the only real negotiations that are made with towns directly are probably franchise agreements. Outside of that, I can't speak for any agreements that are made with towns.
No, I'm not expecting you to. I'm just saying.
I guess the company would maybe in that respect ask for a little understanding here and there. I don't really know how they look at it. I can't speak for our legal department.
I have a question to follow up on what Mr. Hinman, I believe, was trying to get at earlier. How many nights a week are you on call?
Again, that's rotational. There are some nights where I'm on, some weeks where I'm on for the weekend plus a day afterwards. Our old schedule as of December last year was 7 days straight. That changed this year. My area tried a different schedule that has you on a different night every week. It's kind of crazy. It's to try to break up the week. So there's no rhyme or reason to the schedule this year. In other words, trying to track it is hard enough for me. I have it on a spreadsheet, but.
And why is it that you need this truck parked in your driveway any more than the number of nights you're on call?
Well, you mentioned it earlier, and I don't mean to interrupt the question, but you mentioned it earlier that it is a kind of a benefit that you're allowed to take the truck home also?
On the nights when we're not on call, it equates to a company vehicle, if you will, for a 10-mile trip.
So,
Yeah.
again, in having a company vehicle home, it's their gas that you drive to and from work. So it's a benefit for you, the employee.
It is a small benefit, yes, sir.
Right, and I understand a company vehicle as being a benefit, because I get one. And I can appreciate it. The problem is it's the type of vehicle as a benefit. If you had a Time Warner car at your house, even if it had a logo on it, it's not a big deal. It's not offensive. But the fact that it's a big bucket truck, therein lies the issue.
So, my question is, what's the hardship? I can understand in theory, the hardship on the nights when you're on call. What is the hardship to you as the property owner on the nights when you are not on call?
I don't know what I can say. I mean, I have to take a personal vehicle further than I did before to a company location to swap out vehicles, swap out equipment every morning, every evening. While you think that's insignificant, obviously, it's not. It adds up.
So you're saying you just have to drive longer to get to work?
Well, I have to also impose more wear and tear on my own vehicle, which
Something
is added
every
on by
person
this.
who has a job has to do.
You mentioned swapping out equipment. What equipment are you swapping out from your car to the truck?
Test equipment that we take home every day to charge up and keep indoors where it's warm and safe and free from harm. Expensive test meters and laptops, things like that.
Again, I think I understand the benefit. I understand the personal benefit on your behalf. Less gas, you're not putting gas in the car to go back and forth to work. But like Mr. Paulino said, most people have to drive their own car back and forth to work, and
Well,
unfortunately,
the issue, I don't see how taking away that part of a benefit has become the issue. The issue was
No,
the
that's
truck
not the
being
issue.
parked
The
in the
issue is
driveway, I thought.
right, the issue is the truck.
And yeah, and I'll just reiterate to frame it, so you understand the reason that the board members are bringing that up is because their job, the standard that they have to apply for an area variance is they have to weigh the benefit that you're seeking by asking for an exception from what's otherwise provided under the code. They have to weigh that benefit, so they have to understand what it is. They have to weigh that benefit against potential harm to the community and the area by allowing you to have that. So they're weighing what you're articulating as, the benefit, and which is a real benefit, time saved, and all the convenience of having the truck at home versus, how it may affect the look of the neighborhood, the opinion of the neighbors, and other factors that may be involved. So that's the reason that they're focusing on that benefit. It's their duty to do that.
Another one is that when we're dealing with a variance, one of the things that we're obligated to do is to grant a variance that's limited to the need that we've identified that justifies the variance. So if someone comes in and wants a 50-foot variance from a setback, and we determine that 30 will accomplish what they need to accomplish and do it, we're only supposed to grant them the 30 foot, not the 50 feet, just because they want the 50 feet. All right? So here the situation is, all right, the need that you've identified, which I understand. If I've got cable, if I've got internet, if I've got my phone service through Time Warner, and it goes down, I'm going to want it up as soon as possible. And if that
Yes, sir.
means that a truck is in the neighbor's driveway so that I can get it back, okay, I'm willing to live with that. But I don't need that if my neighbor's only doing that one night a week or 3 nights out of 7 or something like that, then I don't need the truck there the other 4 days. It's not doing any good for the residents of the town if you're just using it to drive back and forth to work. And that's what we're getting at. It's not that how much gas you have to use and wear and tear on that's not the issue. The issue is trying to accommodate your situation. And I appreciate your situation. Your employers put you between the town and your employer. Your employer wants you to have that vehicle in your driveway so that you have quick response time so that they get their customers taken care of rapidly. And we can identify that and we have in the past in other cases, as a benefit to the residents of the town, because when you're on call and there's a problem in town, you're going to take care of it in town right away. All right? And if your work area were to change, and it could be you can always make another application. Whether we would grant it to accommodate a change in your 9 to 5 work area or not is a whole different matter. We're dealing with a situation here where you're on call, you want to have quick response time to restore service to people in the town or wherever you may be called, but we realize that you know, we're looking at it from the residents of the town. And that can justify an exception, in my mind, to the size, the height restriction, as long as the truck is parked in a certain way so that it minimizes the impact on the neighborhood. But the question that has come up, which is, I think, a fair one, is, you know, if you're not on call, then why does it need to be there? And if it doesn't need to be there, our rules are that it shouldn't be there. So, I mean, that's, and I don't want to get in a situation where, because we've granted a variance in the past, and we've limited those, and then we grant one to you, that Time Warner and Frontier and anybody else, you know, RG&E, anybody else with bucket trucks with employees decides, well, we can just have you park them in your driveway in Arundecoit because you'll get a variance and we don't have to worry about it. That's what we're trying to do.
Is Gates the only hub in case you were to move around?
No, sir, there are hub sites all over the place, but they don't all have enough parking space for the trucks. Our Arundecoit hub is a perfect example. It's just a tiny little hub over off of Titus that is big enough to hold our equipment, but not big enough to park any of our company trucks.
Is that the one off of,
7-Eleven there?
yeah?
Yes. Yeah, that would have been my first choice had it been big enough, maybe an enclosed, secure area to park the truck, but it's not. It's barely big enough to park the the head-end SUV trucks that they drive in every day for maintenance. So,
And leaving it in some place also can create a potential problem in terms of vandalism. We've heard that from contractors in the past who have
right.
trailers that have all kinds of, you know, equipment and stuff inside that it gets broken into if it's left in some storage area or something like that. We've heard that.
In line with that, we've had a huge problem with vandalism at Gates. Even though part of Gates is secure, we've had a big problem with that, actually, truthfully.
So let me.
It is a consideration.
But again, that is not the position of the town that where to put something in a residential area that's big like that. You know, if they have a problem, secure a building where they can park the trucks. You know, whether it be in Gates or if you rent a building, there's plenty of spaces to rent to put a truck in or whatever. But I don't see the overall value in allowing it.
Could I ask what the difference might be between my truck and Sam Domenica's truck, let's say, on Party Road, the variance that you granted a couple years back?
Well, in looking at that one, you know, hindsight's 20/20. Party Road, a little busier of a neighborhood, a little more of a commercial street at one end and the other. You know, and maybe that will, you know, looking back, again, they're not all the same. But the fact that we did one doesn't mean we have to do all of them, and we look at each one of them on an individual basis. And that being said, this is a neighborhood that doesn't necessarily need to have a big truck like that parked in the driveway.
I would ask how many properties does, so you already mentioned that Time Warner currently has a property in Arundecoit where they store some of their vehicles?
They don't store the vehicles there, no.
Just
That
Small building.
the small
Small
gray
building.
building at the corner of Titus and Buchart that we gave them the variance for the fence to go around,
Okay.
that
Yes.
has all their equipment and stuff inside. It looks like a little house, but it's loaded with equipment. That's the Arundecoit Time Warner location. There
That's
is
the
no
only
other.
property that Time Warner has in the town of Arundecoit?
That I'm aware of, yes.
Let me ask you the bottom line question. If we were to grant you the variance,
Mhm.
but limit it to the nights that you're actually on call, is that something that you can live with?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'd be grateful to have the privilege of taking the truck home restored wholeheartedly, or completely, rather, but I mean, if that's what the board decides. I can honestly say, though, that I can't provide you with a consistent schedule for the exceptions. I wouldn't know how to even begin wording it because it's
One of the things that we
changes every week.
Right. One of the things we rely on is that the people who come in front of us are coming in front of us in good faith,
Mhm.
and that the information that you're giving to us is accurate. We had an occasion in the past where that turned out not to be the case. That's why all the applicants now get sworn. Because when we were given information that was way off and not at all accurate, we found out that, well, nobody was under oath, so there isn't anything you can do about it. So now we put you under oath, and we rely on the fact that the information that you're giving us is accurate, and that you're going to approach it in good faith. Obviously, there are people on this board who don't live far from you at all. I've already mentioned, I go by 7 days a week. So if, if your truck is there in the driveway for, 45 days in a row, and, I'm likely to say, and we've approved it for only the nights you're on call, I'm likely to say, are you really on call? I might even stop by to say to you, you've been on call for the last month and a half? Something like that. So I'm assuming that, I understand, it's not a set schedule, and it rotates, and you might one week have Monday, and the next week have Wednesday, and the next week have Tuesday, and then Thursday, and it might be the weekend, that kind of thing. I'm trying to, we've struck balances in the past, and you mentioned the one on Pardee Road. That was the one I was referring to, where we told him he has to back it in at night, that he has to pull it in face after he comes back. He can't park it next to the neighbor's window. We accommodated that truck to that circumstance, and I'm trying to come up with a way that we might be able to do the same for you, particularly since your neighbors, who are the ones who are most directly affected by it, are okay with it.
Sure, I appreciate
if you had 10 neighbors coming in saying, we don't want it at all, that tells us a lot, because they're the ones who are most familiar with the character of your neighborhood. And so these folks are saying, hey, it's not that far out of line, so, we may be trying to work with you, but that's the approach we take. Our approach is that we have to minimize the exceptions, otherwise the exceptions swallow the rule, kind of like the warrant requirement.
I see.
All right.
The reason I asked what was different about my application of the previous applicants, it wasn't to be a wisecracker, it was because the point was made earlier in the meeting that the truck is bigger than applicants in the past. And just for the record, we're still using a Ford F-450 chassis that we've used for 10 or 12 years. So he had the similarly dimensioned truck. I'm not sure how he wrote up his application at the time, but they are the same size truck, just so everybody
That's what I thought.
understands that.
Because I remembered the truck that he had the last time, and we had, as I said, we dealt with the situation that we had. There were a number of neighbors that felt that it created a problem, so we struck a balance and we limited how he could do it. And I'm trying to approach this in the same way that we approached it, so that, as our attorney said, we're not acting in an arbitrary and capricious manner. Well, Pardee Road's okay, but Twilight isn't.
I appreciate that. Thank
Especially, I don't want you thinking that Pardee's okay and Twilight isn't because Twilight's right around the corner from me. Because that's not it.
Now, as a resident of the town of Arundecoit, I would not want to live next door to the truck. To me, it's an eyesore. It kind of brings down the quality of the neighborhood by having this big truck parked there. I wasn't in favor of the other one either, and I feel that when it comes to commercial ventures, it's up to the people in that business to solve the problem, not the people of the town of Arundecoit. We shouldn't have to accept this burden. And we, as a board, as far as I'm concerned, need to protect the whole town, including the silent majority who won't say anything. They're not going to move. They're just going to be upset. And they're going to be upset with us. They're going to be upset with you. And we'll never know the number because they don't speak. But they're there. And I think when Mr. Hinman talks about driving by every day, those thoughts will go through their head every single day that truck is sitting there. It's not an attractive thing, and that's why the code was written to not allow them in the first place. So I don't know, I haven't heard anything yet tonight that would convince me to be inspired for a compromise or something that would work, because it's a business. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I agree with you, Russ.
The house that's next to you, as I'm looking in this picture and as I'm recalling, the house that's next to you is a one-story 1.5-story really cape, right?
To the left, to the south.
To the south.
Mhm.
The house to the north, the front of your property extends out beyond the garage, so if you backed it in, it's not visible to the house next door. So it's not impairing any of the views or any of the light or anything of either of your neighbors, which was a problem on Pardee Road. And the width and the length are within the code. It's the 30-inch height variation that you're seeking the variance on, right?
Actually, just to have the vehicle there at all, the way I understood it, was the purpose of the application was to obtain the variance to even have it there.
If your vehicle was 30 inches lower in height, you could park it there under the code without needing a variance, because it would comply with the width, the length, and the height. You're 2 inches under the width, and you're 6 inches under the length.
Okay.
It's the height.
I thought it was just the fact that it was that combined with the fact that it was a commercial vehicle altogether.
No, the commercial vehicle has those restrictions. It can't be more than, and you've recited it here, it can't be more than 96 inches wide, it can't be more than 240 inches long, and it can't be more than 90 inches high. And you're 94 inches wide and 234 inches long, so if it was 90 inches high, you could park it there. Commercial, bucket, whatever, because it's not specified like a dump truck, that no matter, a dump truck that's 220 inches long and 90 inches wide and 85 inches high isn't allowed to be parked in a driveway, no matter what. So that's where your variance is for the 30-inch height of the vehicle. That's what brings you here tonight. Okay.
A question. If we were to grant this variance, would it be for this particular truck, or say that Time Warner decided to upgrade its fleet and he got a larger, bigger bucket truck?
We can limit it to the 30-inch thing, and we can put conditions on it, like,
Yeah, and you wouldn't even I think it makes sense to make sure that you have specific conditions, but you wouldn't even necessarily need to, because just with any variance, the variance is for, the 30 inches, if that's the right number, that he is in excess. So you couldn't increase, just like with a setback, if you need a 5-foot variance, you couldn't increase that to 7 feet or something like that.
At least in reading the notice of violation, it seems to me that the section of the town code that is cited expressly prohibits commercial vehicles, vehicles primarily used for commercial purposes in conjunction with a business. And that it's not merely the height, but it's the purpose. And I seem to recall that in a number of circumstances, we have denied variances for any type of trailer or large vehicle that has any type of commercial marking on the side at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I recall.
Donna, can you speak to that, to the specific sections of the code that you found that
Yeah,
required a
I
variance?
believe that, it'd be nice if I could just grab it and read it. I don't have it here, but the whole code? No.
What's the section?
But, no, you can have commercial writing on the truck. There's nothing in the code that says you can't. And you're right to say that dump trucks, bucket trucks is not one of the listed ones. I think when they got the violation, it might have been written as such, but when we looked for it, it wasn't listed like the chairman said. It wasn't underneath like step van. There were several. So it is.
Do you have the relevant section of the code, the reference?
Well, I have the number.
Yeah, because I have the code.
it's 235, 104.1A through F.
Right.
That's what's cited in the violation, notice of apparent violation.
Got it.
Can you read that for me?
But you're right, the way it's written.
Yes, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right.
I just-
I'll just start reading out loud and hope that I'm on the right spot. Okay, it is the purpose of this section to regulate the parking of motor vehicles in all districts zoned for residential use in the town, which I assume this is a residential district, so as to reduce hazardous traffic conditions, protect those districts from polluted air, excessive noise, trash and refuse, protect the residents from unreasonable burdens in gaining access to their residences, preserve the character of those districts as residential, to protect the public highways from excessive wear and tear, to promote efficiency in the maintenance of the streets, preserve the value of property, protect the safety of pedestrians, and maintain the general health and welfare of residents in those districts. As used in the section, the following terms shall have these meanings. Commercial vehicle is defined as any vehicle designated for or primarily used for commercial purposes in conjunction with a business.
Not explaining height and length and all that other.
And then it's
Comes in
and then
later.
it goes on to say the section shall apply to all residential districts, zoning requirements. So it's odd that the definition doesn't necessarily follow the requirements. But the following requirements apply. There is a gross weight. It's 10,500 pounds. One such vehicle per dwelling unit. Personal use by occupant of the dwelling unit. So it seems to say that it would allow one commercial vehicle. No parking on vacant lots. Parking within a public way is permitted. Occupants shall submit proof of ownership and the vehicle weight. And then restrictions. The following are prohibited: dump trucks, construction equipment trailers, tow trucks, buses, semis, step vans, freight vans, flatbeds, sanitation equipment, and other vehicles exceeding any two of the following dimensional requirements. And that's when we get into the height of 90 inches, length of 240, and width of 96.
Exceeding any two of the following?
Yes, all other vehicles exceeding any two of the following dimensions.
So if he's only exceeding one, does he even need a variance?
But you're going back to the original part of that says it's a commercial vehicle used only for commercial use.
But
And it's,
the general requirements are that you're allowed to have one per dwelling if it's used, personal use by the occupant of the dwelling unit. I assume this would qualify. And yeah, that it's the restrictions are only for, and I don't know if this could be deemed to fall under any of those types that I read. Some of them seem fairly
well, it's a heavy,
vague.
it is a heavy equipped truck.
Right.
I'm familiar with the type of truck it is, and it is a
Is it more than the gross weight that, what was it set out, 10,000?
1,000 pounds.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be more than the gross weight. If it's any one of those categories,
Right.
it's also not okay. But yes, I don't know. Do you know what the weight is?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, so it has to meet the weight requirement. It cannot be one of the types that we read, and then it also cannot exceed two of the dimensional requirements.
But number 6 also says the occupant shall submit proof of ownership when asked.
Yes.
That gets into
And he
another
doesn't own it.
category again.
You
He doesn't own the
mentioned
vehicle.
that presumably for personal use or something
Yeah.
to that effect, and you said we can assume that. I wasn't so sure.
Right, so that's another, that would be an issue of fact too on the interpretation of that, the personal use by the applicant of the dwelling unit. It seems to me, and I don't, this is the first time I'm reading these requirements in detail, but it seems that this section is geared toward, the individual who owns a business and parks his work truck at his home. And so and I think we've had applications like that in the past where rather than having an individual who would have to himself rent space to park a work vehicle, you allow it to be parked at his home. This is a little bit different because again, it's there is a benefit obviously to the applicant in the time and cost to have to swap vehicles out. But it would not be, the applicant's burden to otherwise house this vehicle. It would be Time Warner's. But again, according to the language of the code, I don't know if there are questions of fact now as to whether or not we're meeting the weight requirement, whether the vehicle falls under any of these categories, or whether, two of these three other dimensional requirements are not met. Because, I don't know if this could be deemed, it's probably not a dump truck, but a construction equipment or trailer or a
Not
tow
100%
truck or a
sure,
bus.
But it could be close to the 10,000 pound weight.
It's 10,500 pounds.
Yeah,
The boom on that is heavy.
It's a maintenance bucket. It's not a construction bucket. Construction buckets are made by companies like Telstra, and they're much heavier trucks. They're made of, the booms are insulated, the buckets are steel. They're a lot heavier than these. These are just maintenance buckets on a Ford F chassis, like an F450 chassis, slightly bigger chassis than a pickup truck, let's say.
But it's not an Alltech
No, no. It's not a Telstra or an Alltech or anything like that. It's not like an RG&E bucket or anything like that.
Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to defer your application to our meeting in October, so we can find out what the weight is, and can look into whether or not you even need the variance?
There may be more.
Because it seems to me, from what she's read, that if your weight is under the 10.5, that you might not need the variance.
That's completely up to the board. I mean, I really don't have a say in that.
Well,
Uh,
it's up to us. Yes, we could say we're gonna table it, but the difference is if you don't consent to it, then we have time limitations under the law that we have to act under, or it's deemed that we've taken action. I forget what action it's deemed that we've taken.
A denial.
A denial. all
Then
right?
we'll just have to start the process all over again at some point, would we not?
Well, you're only allowed to apply, if it's denied, you can only apply once every 12-month period of time. So you'd be out of luck for another year. So what I'm asking is, you okay with agreeing to wait till October so we can look into these questions a little more? Because if you are, then our time isn't running, if you agree. If you don't agree, our time runs, and it could result in a denial and precluding you from applying for another year.
No, sir, we'll work towards a resolution as quickly as possible. That's fine.
Chairman, my question to you is, do we have to take a vote on the fact that we would table it?
Yeah, all I did was ask him if he would agree to that.
Okay, but
Because if
us as board members
agrees, yeah,
would
oh,
agree.
absolutely. If he agrees, it's not chargeable in terms of our time.
Okay.
If he doesn't agree, then it is chargeable against the time that we have. That's why I wanted to clarify that, because tabling it's an option, voting on it and granting it's an option, voting on it and denying it's an option, voting on it and putting conditions is a fourth option, and I'm sure we might come up with a
Maybe
fifth or a
others.
sixth option. But yes, I wasn't trying to
No, I
impose anything on the board. I would never,
Okay.
I don't believe in that. All right. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Lyman? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Step right up, sir. You can give us your name and address.
My name is Tony Angie. I live at 139 Twilight, which is to the left of Dave here, and
So you're the house south of his?
north of him.
North of him.
North
Okay.
of him, right. And when he parks his truck there, I really don't have a problem with that, because he parks far enough up towards the garage that it doesn't interfere with cars coming by that I can't see, or children coming by and I can't see. And like I said, I came in a little late, but I heard you say, which I agree to, that if I have a problem, I'd rather have him come out of the house, into the truck, and take care of the problem versus come out, go to work, get the truck, and then take care of my problem. So, and there's other, like I say, other trucks I've seen in driveways. But other than that, I don't have a problem with that at all.
He's a good neighbor.
Good neighbor, yep. Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone who'd like to come up and talk to us about it? We'll close the hearing with respect to that then, and move on to our next case. Thank you, sir.
ZB 1509-3, upon the matter of request by Courtney Liggett Sonowski and Tisha Sonowski for an area variance to construct a 12-foot by 30-foot front porch with less than required front and side setbacks on premises 285 Winfield Road in an R2 residential district.
I'm Courtney Liggett-Sarnowski.
I'm Tisha Sarnowski, 285 Winfield Road.
All right, you should both raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that everything you say tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead. Well, we just want to build a deck on the front of our property, and it's,
We got deck envy. Our neighbor across the street built a deck. He didn't need a variance. His deck looks really nice, and we got deck envy. And ours were a little bit, well, I forget how Donna worded it, but our setback isn't quite enough for the amount of feet that we want to have it built. So we needed a variance to be able to do that, and I didn't know what a variance was. All I knew is I needed a permit, so this is all new to me, so
The
not really
deck that's
sure.
directly across the street from you doesn't have a roof on it. It has one of those pergolas.
Yeah, it looks really cute.
yeah.
I got envy.
Down the street from you is
They have like a fan.
they have a porch,
It's beautiful.
and there was another porch that we approved a little further down the street from
In the
you.
future, once these guys get bigger, we have a 4-year-old too at home, then we may apply for another one to do the top part, but we can't afford that right now.
Well, see, the problem that you run into is, and I'm just speaking in general terms here.
Please.
My experience since I've been on the board is that we kind of like front porches.
Okay.
We're not big fans of front decks.
So you want the whole get up and go?
Well, we prefer the whole get up and go. The difference between a porch and a deck is you're more likely to put a barbecue grill on a deck than you are on a porch. And
okay.
decks,
Oh.
don't have anything over them, and they kind of look.
We could do the pergola, whatever it is type thing, but we had a 3-year
even know
plan
that.
for when our second one gets out of daycare and starts kindergarten next year, to then put the roof on. But with 2 in daycare, we're trying to
It's expensive.
do
To do
little
that.
steps.
And I know if I did the part now and put both pieces in it, I would have the year, like I have the year to do this, and I know that I can't afford to do it in a year. We just had to upgrade it and get another vehicle. Humanly, I can't afford it. I mean, we both work, we have 2 kids in daycare. I mean, it is a future plan, but I can't afford to do both at the same time. I have to do
Yeah.
and
But we're not
stuff.
going to do barbecues in the front at
No.
all.
Well,
We have a backyard.
we've done conditions that have prohibited
Yeah, that's
grilling
fine.
on
Yeah.
front stoops.
Is there a reason it's gotta be so big? I mean, it is a pretty good size one, 12 by 30.
With the future thought of having it be a porch and having the roof over it, that's what the thought process of having it be that.
Follow the
Our
lines
house
of
is-
the roof.
Yeah.
Our house is pretty small, and we're trying to make more square footage available just for family time.
Uh-huh.
Instead of having to buy a new house, we love the neighborhood and our neighbors. We've talked to a lot of them as we've been discussing, creating this deck or eventual porch. And they're all in agreement with it. And we have a really family-oriented neighborhood. Everyone kind of congregates together, and
So if I understand you correctly, this is phase 1 of your plan,
yes,
which ultimately will lead to a roof
Yes.
over the top and some form of screen or glass or combination of enclosure
yeah.
And yeah, it'll be roof next, then in the future, yes.
wrapping it around so you can use it at
Yes.
least 3, if not 4
That would
seasons
be,
out of the year.
That would
yes,
be-
that's our goal.
Yes.
What treatment would you want to use on the deck? I'm kind of thinking like if it were painted, it might not appear so much as a deck, but if it were painted the same color of the house or something like that, it might not. It may lend itself more to looking like a porch.
Rather than having it like a stain. I was
Yeah.
actually asking my neighbors' opinions. I don't know if everybody can hear me. I was asking the neighbors' opinions because you probably saw if you drove past the house, we have the 6-foot tall stockade fence, and that I have the part stained. It's like a dark, like a brown color. And I was like, should I stain it that color? Should I do it this? So we're kind of having a vote on it. So it's not totally mine, but ultimately it'll be her decision on what color it goes to be. But it's kind of like what
talked about
everybody's
painting
thinking. Yeah. I'm not going to paint it
Under
like
your-
purple, but
Under your plan, your multi-year plan to get a nice porch, not just a deck there,
Sure.
how long would you have to wait to be able to afford a deck and a covering?
We need to wait until we get the one in kindergarten, which is next year. So we have a 4-year-old who's in pre-K, and she'll be going to Ivan Green next
So,
year.
I mean, I don't want to, I have to be technical, I'm a lawyer. If you waited an extra year, would you be able to do a porch instead of just a deck? I mean, this is like part one versus part two, because from our perspective, if we approve a deck, hoping it'll turn into a porch, then it kind of creates some problems, because what if someone else down the street tells us the same thing and then they don't turn it into a porch? What are we going to do? We're going to have a lot of decks. So you're saying that within a couple of years, within a year, you might be able to do all of it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, once we don't
So-
have that.
So if we were to, but I think another alternative, and you may tell me I'm wrong on this, but I think if we were to, we could approve it with a condition that it's going to be covered with a roof within 2 years, 3 years.
That's
And then if it
all
wasn't-
well and good.
If it wasn't covered, then the deck, the variance would no longer be valid, and the deck would have to be potentially removed, or they'd have to come in and get approval to continue the deck.
That's kind of a scary financial hardship. If a financial hardship came along or something and they couldn't afford it, then you're going to penalize them, and make it rip it off.
Not necessarily,
I wouldn't
they'd have to come back in front of us at the end of that time period, whatever it is,
Another variance for the deck that's already up.
potentially.
What about
Yeah.
the,
Want to put 'em-
I think theoretically you legally could do that. The things that I would keep in mind are, one, that any conditions you put on this application or any other application should be able to, articulate the reasons why those conditions are designed to, mitigate potential impacts. So if you don't like decks, but you think porches are okay, why is a porch better than a deck? And that should be fleshed out. And then the other issue with conditions is their enforceability. So just thinking of down the road, how that's going to be from an enforceability standpoint, because it will become a code enforcement issue if there's a porch requirement and it's not met, how the town would want to deal with that, and if they would want to be requiring people to tear down.
See, I'm also looking at the agenda where it said that you're going to construct a 12 by 30-foot porch.
Mhm.
I think that's what,
Well, it's a
Well, that's
roofless
our
porch.
goal
it's
right
roofless porch.
now. Yeah.
what about that idea to maybe compromise and think about that pergola? I saw the house across the street. I thought they did a nice job. I thought it looked really sharp.
I don't even know what pergola is.
Pergola is the
Just the strips
Like
going
not a
across.
horizontal boards that
Yeah, we could
run
do that.
perpendicular to each
Those
other.
aren't that
and-
expensive, and then, you guys know, does that make it easier then in the future to put an actual, or does
Not
that?
necessarily.
Not necessarily.
It'd be a
When
whole
it's
new
done
structure.
If it's done the right
With
way,
that in
yes.
mind, with
Heavy
that in
duty,
mind,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Done the right way, yes. If it's not done the right way, no. It could result in a disaster if we tried to put it.
When are you planning on starting the project?
It depends if we get an approval.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
The point I want to make is that, you can build this thing as a deck, and you're going to have foundations for the deck.
Correct.
You start putting a roof on it, you start putting other materials on it, your foundation might not be okay for it. So if the town comes again, you may be doing some other work. So you might want to think about what it is exactly overall, so that the base is made permanent,
Yes.
so that you're going to be able to put a roof on it. So I would imagine they got to have some kind of drawings brought into the town on your foundation, but you should have your overall plan. Don't get, I just don't want to see you put something in and then most of it's got to be taken out because it's not built right.
If we grant the variance, you still have to get the building permit, and it has to
Right,
comply
right,
with
yeah.
all of that, so, yeah.
Correct.
Sure,
But
but I
when
think the
you're
point
doing
is,
it-
My
right,
point
if
is
the
the
permit's only
foundation for the finished
for
product.
phase one.
It
Joe's
does-
saying is make sure that when the town's looking at the plans, they know that your ultimate plan is to do a porch.
Gotcha.
I think,
Okay, I wasn't-
I think a more valid point is, your current plans are plans for a deck. This foundation is not the foundation necessary, not
hold the
maybe
roof.
necessarily for a roof and for all that stuff.
Joe brought up a good.
Very good
Brought up
point.
a very good point, because if you do look at their plans, their footers are like Mr. Polina just said, it's,
So you won't be able to build a
you
porch
won't build,
necessarily
you
on
couldn't
this
build on
foundation.
top of that
It would
deck
stand
unless
up.
you had a
Gotcha.
And that's
better
one of the
footing.
reasons why doing a porch now, when we want it to turn into something later, well, you have to design maybe all of it now and then do it in
Gotcha.
phases.
Okay. I'm following you now. It took me a minute to kind of put it all together, but.
But you can, as I have done it at my own house. I built the pergola outside of the edge of the deck and sent the beams all the way down to the frost
Really, Michael,
line.
so you have experience with this, huh?
Yeah. So,
Come over and help.
so it is sturdy, so that it could have a roof put on it.
Okay.
But and then you could do the footing that you've got on the deck, and then the outside walls would be supported by the post for the pergola.
Okay.
The most important thing, it sounds to me like you need to do, from what everybody here is saying that knows what they're talking about, and I'm not one of them, is that you want to talk to someone who does.
Right.
And at least, if they're not doing the work, at least have them guide you in what you should be doing.
But
You got a
we're
guy here.
good with
Right.
the, we'll
I
do
saw a
the
card.
pergola. Pergola, that's what it's
Yeah.
called, Court? We'll do the pergola. And then, you know, the guy across the street has that, the pitch thing?
Is a peaked, I think it's called the gable.
That looks nice. I like that. I think we should do that too. Because then instead of the metal thing that's there now, it'll kind of look good.
But you don't need a variance to do that. The variance that you need is to go out the
Right,
12
I know,
feet
but now
from the
I'm
front of the
thinking
house.
to make it look prettier.
What you do in terms of design and stuff, that's between you and the town and your neighbors.
Right,
We're talking about 12 feet.
right,
That's what our focus is that 12 feet.
right.
And whether it's a deck or it's going to grow into a porch.
It's gonna be a porch.
Okay.
So we could grant a variance allowing a deck of this size with a condition that the deck's foundation be strong enough to support an entire porch?
So that it could be converted to a porch at a future date. Yes, we could, I think we could do that.
Just for reference, if you decide to do the pergola, the posts for the pergola, if they're put into the ground or put on a deeper footing, would support the deck. And so it could be, you wouldn't have to do two separate supports. You'd do one support that would support the deck at, deck level.
Right.
Along with the top of it,
Okay.
with one set of footings. You wouldn't have to,
Oh, I'm following you.
draw it all the way down.
Me and you, Michael.
I just like this stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, your neighbors across the street, I thought they did a real nice job of
I
that.
think so too.
Yeah,
I was also wondering if they had needed a variance or got a permit, but
Uh-oh.
that was just a thought. Yeah.
I think some of the, just for reference, I think some of the home stores or the lumber yards would help you design it.
Yeah, Lowe's has a design app
Right.
that I was looking at.
So, you kind of put in what you do and they'll, or what you'd like, and they can help you.
Okay.
I'd also recommend that you use the Lowe's app, that's great, but I'd run it by a builder, a contractor, somebody who,
Her dad's an architect, so.
There you
Well,
go.
then.
There you go.
well then,
Yeah.
There you go.
all right, you're all covered then.
Yeah.
Ask Dad.
And his price is probably within your budget.
Yes, it is. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone who'd like to come up and talk to us about it? We'll close the hearing with respect to this matter.
As you say, there's letters of support. Yeah. They were handed out, they were just handed out right before the meeting.
I have your
Oh,
mine.
oh, I didn't see those. Okay, so then for the record, we have letters of support from Claudia Bell at 310 Winfield Road. An indecipherable signature, James Rohr, from 257 Winfield Road. Mary Jean Weld from 289 Winfield Road. Dana Jensen and Donna Jensen from 286 Winfield Road. Chris Mayer from 278 Winfield Road. Deb Hustis from 270 Winfield Road. Tara Oakes from 303 Winfield Road. Ann Pulowski from 313 Winfield Road. Sorry, I had missed those. Thank you. So we'll close the hearing with respect to this matter and move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ZB 1509-4, upon matter of request by Matthew Broadman, acting as agent for Christopher and Kathy Donansky, for an area variance to construct a one-story rear addition with less than required rear setback on premises 25 Northwick Drive in an R1 residential district.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Brasley, architect. My address is 10 Cambridge Court in Fairport.
You could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that everything you say tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Welcome. Once again, my name is Jim Brasley, architect. I'm joined tonight by the owner of the property, Chris Denseski, and also the contractor for the project, Matt Broadman from Fitch Construction. We're here to talk about 25 Northwick Drive. Mr. Denseski plans to build a one-story, 622-square-foot addition onto the rear of his existing home. And the purpose of the addition is his elderly parents would have got to come to the point where they're going to move in with him. It'll have two small bedrooms, a full bath, and a small sitting room. And there will be an interior connection from the addition onto the existing house. For this construction project, we're requesting a variance to allow the rear setback to be 19 feet, where 30 feet is required in this neighborhood in the R1 zoning district. I do believe we meet the 5 conditions, the 5 factors to be considered when granting a variance. Number 1, there will be no change to the character of the neighborhood. There are no neighbors behind the house on 25 Northwick. It's the former Temple Beth David Synagogue, which is now closed. In fact, the parking lot for the synagogue comes practically to their rear property line. Also, some of the Denseski's neighbors to the right and left of their house have sheds and other accessory buildings that come almost to the rear property line. So there are other properties on the street with construction close to the property line, and only a small bit of it, the proposed addition, will fall into the setback variance. We did look at some alternative solutions that wouldn't require a variance, but the location we've selected, if you have the floor plan and the site plan in front of you, really is the best place for the addition for several reasons. First of all, the garage, the rear of the garage is a little farther forward than the rest of the house, so we're not coming back as far by building behind the garage. Plus, they won't lose any of their rear windows, and naturally they want to have their existing kitchen windows and existing dining room windows to remain to look out in their backyard. We don't believe this variance is substantial. It is 19 feet where 30 feet is permitted. Once again, there's other houses on the same side of the street that have accessory buildings that are close to the rear property line, so it is similar to the neighborhood, and only a small part of the proposed 622 square foot addition falls within the variance setback. Even with the addition, we still meet the area coverage rule, which is no greater than 25%. We'll only be at 20.2%, so I don't think this is too big of an addition for the lot. There will be no impact on the environment. There's no drainage issues on the property now. The addition this size will have no impact on any drainage in the neighborhood, and the proposed addition will be virtually invisible from the street. Obviously, the next door neighbors will be able to see it. Mr. Denseski did inform each of his next door neighbors on either side, to the east and to the west, of his proposed project, and we've heard no objections from the neighbors so far. And the last...
I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the town sends out notices to the neighbors within a certain 200 feet. Okay.
And then the old self-created rule, evidently this is self-created because he wants to build an addition for his elderly parents. But as you also know, sometimes you don't necessarily have to meet that condition for a variance. In his favor, however, the Denseski's house is just slightly set back farther from his neighbor's house. They're 54.8 feet back from the street, and it must be a 50-foot setback on that street because all the other houses are 50 feet. So for whatever reason, when this house was built 50 years ago or so, they built it 5 feet farther back. So we're already hurt by the pre-existing condition of the house. But obviously, naturally, with his desire to build an addition, it is a self-created problem. So in summary, we believe this addition is the best possible location to suit the desires of the Denseskis without causing a negative impact on the neighborhood. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for that very good presentation and for pointing out the fact that there's nothing behind this property but a parking lot and that other folks have sheds and accessory structures towards the back of their lot lines.
Thank you.
Does the landscaping along the side going to stay there too?
Yes.
Which minimizes any visual impact to the neighbors.
There is landscaping along the side property lines now, and that's not going anywhere. The Denseskis are not extensive gardeners, but they do have some minor landscaping on either side of their property. Any other questions?
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone who'd like to talk about it? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next one. ZB 1509-5, upon the matter of request by Deborah Sikornson for an area variance to construct a rear deck with less than required rear setback on premises 154 Gills Avenue in an R2 residential district.
My name is Deborah Scorsone Cavalier. Actually, I just got married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I live at 144 Giles Ave, and I'm here to request...
You could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that everything you say tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but now you make it.
That's okay. A little nervous. I'm here to request that I can put a constructed deck with 19 feet setback instead of the 30-foot setback in my backyard. I've spoke to all the neighbors that, there's 3 of them that border my backyard, and they're all for it. One of them already has a deck, and she has no issue with it. They did sign a paper, but they didn't put their addresses on the paper. So, but it's just a lot easier for me. I have a sliding glass door to go out on a deck. So I need 19, because we're going to do a 14 by 14 deck.
And it's going to, my understanding is it's going to be 18 inches high off the ground?
Yeah.
And is that what the sliding door is 18 inches off the ground?
That's what my contractor gave me at the plans, that it was 18.
And I think this is probably going to come up when you put it into 10. You're going to have 2 steps, but are you going to have a railing on it at all at
Yes.
18 inches? Okay, so it'll have a
There'll
railing.
be a little railing. There's actually going to be 2 sets of stairs.
Right.
One going off towards my patio, and then one going off towards the
To the
backyard.
backyard.
Yeah.
And then it'll be railings around the
Yes.
rest of that?
Yes, because I do have young grandchildren, so I want to make sure that, even though it's only, a little ways off the ground, I don't want them falling, breaking their neck,
Okay. It's going to be about 2 or 3 steps off the ground, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else have any other questions or comments?
She specifically mentioned the spindles on the railing as being 3.5 inches on center. Is that a code thing? Compared, so that
There's some kind of code requirement on how
yeah, so
close they have to be, because if they're wider, then kids can get through them. And if they're narrower, they can get caught.
Right, I believe it said 4 inches. It couldn't be more than 4 inches.
I just never saw the number before show up on this, and I wondered there's a specific reason, because it's code.
And for children, that's
Yeah.
why they did it.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Anyone who would like to just talk to us about it? And the reason I went through that quickly is because there's nobody else in the room. Another applicant. And we'll close the hearing with respect to that case, and we will take a 10-minute break and resume at 20 of 9. Let me check and see I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there's anyone here for the first application on North Terrace. I don't believe that the applicant for 129 Twilight Light is still here. I believe that the applicants for 285 Winfield left. And I think we have the folks from Northwick and Ms. Scorsone from Giles. So we'll do 4, 5, and then 1, 2, and 3. It rarely works out quite so neat that way. But. All right, with respect to the application relating to 25 Northwick Drive, this is a type 2 action for seeker purposes. And does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to this application?
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that we grant the variance as applied for based on the following findings. This will not be an undesirable change in the neighborhood. It will be a desirable change in the neighborhood, and that they're adding to the property value, which is going to increase property values around the area. This is not a substantial request in that the area where they're going to be adding the addition is not going to be up against another property behind it, and it will be in line with other people having the accessory structures. In addition, you won't be able to see it from the street, particularly because this house is already set back an additional 5 feet. This will have no adverse physical or environmental impact. This is a small addition on an area that is otherwise environmentally sound. The alleged difficulty is not particularly self-created. They're only looking for 5 additional feet beyond what the original house setback is because the house is pushed back farther. And there really is no other feasible means to achieve the ability to add additional square footage onto this property while maintaining use of windows and really taking advantage of the fact that there's this patio dead space behind the garage that they're going to be incorporating into the addition.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, 7 votes in favor, no opposed, no abstentions, nobody is absent. We're all here. Next item will be the application pertaining to 154 Giles Avenue. This is also a type 2 action for seeker purposes. Does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to this application?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I make a motion that we grant the variance as applied for the deck at 154 Giles Avenue. And I make this motion based on the following findings. First, that there can be no benefit to this applicant, the benefit of a nice sizable deck in this backyard because of the size of the backyard. So there really is no alternative feasible means to achieve a deck on the backyard because of the size. This will not be an undesirable change in the neighborhood because it's going to be behind the house where no one else really can see it, and the neighbors on the other side of the backyard have already said they have no problem with it. The request is not substantial. It's a small number of feet, and again, because it's behind the house, people going up and down the street will not be able to see it. The deck will have no adverse physical or environmental effects because it's a deck, and decks do not have those effects. And the alleged difficulty is self-created in that she wants a deck where the code would not allow her to have one, but that is not a factor that would mitigate against providing this variance for the applicant.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, 7 votes in favor, no opposed, no abstentions. We continue to all be present. Returning to the top of the agenda, and the application pertaining to 26 North Terrace. This is a type 2 action for seeker purposes. Does anyone wish to make an application with respect to, or make a motion with respect to this application?
I'll make a motion on 26 North Terrace to approve the application. I do not believe it will adversely affect the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood, because basically that particular area is like an alley, and it is just an access road to the backyards of the people behind her. I think it won't affect the environment. That is just a fence. It is a self-created issue because they do want to remove an old fence and put up and remove some old shrubs to make it look neater and cleaner. And it's not a substantial variance. It's just a regular 6-foot-high backyard fence, in my opinion. So based on that, I think we should approve it.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, 7 votes in favor, no opposed, no abstentions, and we're all present. Next application is pertaining to 129 Twilight Drive. This is a type 2 action for seeker purposes. Does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to this application? I would move that we table this because in listening to the,
And sorry, just to backtrack, this is an unlisted action, the parking of the
unlisted,
vehicle.
okay, I'm sorry. In listening to the code requirements and what the limitations are, if this vehicle is under 10,500 pounds, then it would appear at this point that a variance is not required at all because it would meet, it only exceeds one of the dimensions as opposed to 2, which the code seems to require.
I understood that the code also contemplates that the resident is the owner of the vehicle, and that is one of the basic requirements of the applicant asking to park the vehicle, is that it's not some other person's vehicle, it's their vehicle.
Right, so the code and the language of the code could be maybe interpreted in different ways, unfortunately, but there are two things that involve the concept that you're talking about, and these are under general requirements. So in order to have a vehicle parked, assuming that it meets the weight requirements, one is that it is for the personal use by the occupant of the dwelling unit. I think that arguably is or is not okay. And the other is that the occupant shall submit proof of ownership and vehicle weight. It does not say proof that they own it. It may be proof of ownership as to who owns the vehicle, but that
It would make sense that...
It's kind of vague.
it's vague language.
It would make sense, though, when you consider the two parts, one of them being personal use, the other being ownership, that it would be personal ownership.
I think that's fair. It's a code interpretation issue.
I can't believe, again, personal use, short of driving it home to and from work, personal use would be if he wanted to take it out to the movies on a Saturday night, he's going to drive that truck. That's personal use. He wants to go to Wegmans, he's going to drive that truck. That's personal use.
I agree
don't-
that that's a reasonable interpretation of
Right.
the language. So there are several issues here, and I think there are several issues here as to whether or not a variance is required, and if so, for what particular provision or provisions of this section.
Your motion was to table it?
So that we could look into and find out what interpretation the town applies to that, because I think
I believe we already have that in the form of a notice of violation.
That's correct.
So I believe that the town already has indicated that they believe that this is not a personal use of a personally owned vehicle. I'm not sure that tabling it will really achieve anything.
I'm not sure how specific the notice of violation was.
notice of violation didn't identify. What it identified essentially was that it was a commercial vehicle parked in
So
a
we should,
driveway, and it
Clearly, the code officer has interpreted for whatever reason that this vehicle requires a
it's
variance to be parked where it is.
Corporation-owned, large corporation-owned,
Yeah.
heavy equipment vehicle that's parked in the driveway. Can't get much more commercial than that.
And it took them a while to come in here, because this was written on the 10th, and they were supposed to be in on the 20th to be in the June meeting. Now we're in September, then they're just coming.
So the violation is from May.
Yeah, it's,
He did remove it from the premises for a while, so he could think of what he was going to do, and then he came in. So there was a gap where it wasn't even on the property any longer.
So he complied with the notice of apparent violation while, during the period when he was deciding how he wanted to
I
proceed.
think a portion of the time.
Yeah.
Not the whole time.
I think in a broader term of what the main objective of writing this type of thing into the code really is. And it seems like it's not to be within so many pounds or even size, whatever, it's to keep large commercial vehicles out of the neighborhoods. As a blanket thing.
So-
Obviously, there'll be somebody has to drive home for lunch or whatever the heck, but basically to keep them out from being housed in a neighborhood. And we can try to compromise that and work with the people, and I think that's a good thing, but I think overall, if we approve this parking of this vehicle in this driveway, we are basically violating the spirit of the code.
I would ask.
I agree.
I mean, I tend to agree also, which is why I question if tabling would be productive. But I would ask council if the applicant had a vehicle that was within the width, length, and height restrictions.
And weight and also type. So assuming it's a
Let's
permitted.
just say,
type
let's just
is
say,
the type is a
let's
big-
say type is fine also. Would that applicant would that resident have to come to the town with two pieces of paper, it seems to me? The type, height, length, width, fine. They would have to come with a piece of paper saying the weight is appropriate and ownership.
Correct.
All right. So if an applicant has a vehicle that meets the height, weight, and all of those, or meets 2 out of 3.
Correct.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. They still would have to show proof of weight and proof of ownership.
Yes, that's a general requirement to having, yes, a permitted vehicle.
The other concern I have, which is another reason for tabling it, is I want to go back and review the presentation and the deliberation portion of the meeting where we approved the variance for a very similar vehicle on Pardee Road. I also would like to do the same for the variance that I know we approved. I believe it was for a telephone truck on, may have been Hastings Lane or one of those 4 that runs off of Pine Grove. And if we've approved any other of these applications in the last, say, 10 years, I'd like to look at the proceedings of those, because I'm concerned about having granted variances in the past and now saying now we're not going to grant it, when on their face they might appear to be so similar that could be.
One of your favorite arguments as the chairman of our board is that you say not all applications are the same, and that we don't look at we look at each application. We're supposed to look at each application on an individual basis.
And that's true, and that's why I want to see.
So the fact that we might have done something different in the past.
No, that's why I want to see, were there differences between what was presented to us
I
on
don't
those
think it's
occasions
relevant.
and this?
I don't believe
It
it's
is relevant for one reason. Time Warner would rather lawyer up on this application and get a finding in their favor that they can use elsewhere than maybe let this one slide. So it's very possible that this could be something that might make its way toward litigation. So it might make
so be
sense.
it.
It might make sense to just pump the brakes, take a month, get a little clarification on the purpose of the law, because I mean, I don't think the applicant was here with his brother or his best friend. It seemed he was here with a company representative, which
And
would
the
lead me to believe that
company
maybe there's...
representative didn't get up and speak. I think the last time he got up and spoke, I don't believe, I think, like Russ said, the spirit of the law and the zoning law in our town is to keep the town as relatively clean as possible of commercial vehicles, with the small exceptions of a owner-occupied truck or whatever.
And to your point, I think it's obvious that if we already have approved one Time Warner vehicle in this town, then the primary justification for it to provide services in the town of Arundequoit is a crazy make-em-up. So I definitely understand that we're taking these on a case-by-case basis, and that the justification is completely underlined by the fact that we've already approved a vehicle of this type for this company, but I still think that if we want to be safe, it might make sense to table it for a month.
My only concern, I'm not saying that I disagree with you. My concern is that if we're going to deny this variance and we've granted others, I want to be sure that we're stating a reason that separates this application from others that we've granted. I'm not saying that just because we've granted them in the past, otherwise we wouldn't need to meet and discuss it. The town would say, yeah, well, they've done it in the past, so we'll give it to you. We don't even have to go in front of the board. But I think that my concern is that we're going to see more of these as more residents may have employers who decide I don't need to pay for a place to store the X, Y, or Z because I can just have my employees park it in their driveway. And I don't want to get into every fifth house has a bucket or a utility trailer or that kind of thing.
And that, like Russ said earlier, and I've said it in the past, I wouldn't want to live next to that truck.
No. I mean, they're making money off of it, for crying out loud. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And they obviously can figure a different way or place to park it. And again, now if it was a mom and pop store, that was at the Cooper Dell and, I mean.
I think we turned down the guy with the orange
Yeah.
truck, didn't we?
Well, I'm just saying,
I think we turned him down, right?
There's also another one on
Oh.
Ellingwood, was the same situation. I think we turned him down too.
again, well, you had made a motion to table.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if you are going to be investigating into the differences, and I think that it's always good to have context in any of your decisions, that it's twofold, the ways that you would distinguish this from other applications that you have either approved or denied. And one would be, the one side of the balance, which is the benefit to the applicant. Maybe here, if you did not think this was appropriate, it's because, what the applicant is gaining is, 15 minutes less on their commute and some savings in gas versus maybe, the guy who owns his own business and would have to pay, $500 a month to store his vehicle, something like that. So there's the benefit, and then there's also the detriment side to the community or to the immediate neighborhood, and that's really what you're looking at in these types of circumstances. So how does this particular neighborhood stack up against others where you have either approved similar applications or denied? Is it more onerous? Is it more burdensome to this neighborhood maybe than in other areas if it's on more of a major thoroughfare or something else where you've approved them in the past? So those are the types of things you would want to consider.
So, yeah, like there are fewer children crossing Pardee Road as opposed to this street.
Yes, because and that's explicit in the whole purpose of this section. It's the pollution, air, noise, trash that's anywhere, but you're protecting the residents against, and preserving pedestrians, safety issues, and then also street issues. Is the route to get to and from this neighborhood over more, less heavily trafficked streets where, it could be tearing them up more than, maybe into other applicants where they're coming right off of, Ridge Road or another thoroughfare into their neighborhood more easily. So those are all things that you could consider.
I would just ask one question before I can decide whether or not to table this. Can someone remind me, has the board approved the use of a Time Warner vehicle at some point in the town of Arundequoit?
Pardee Road.
So a Time Warner vehicle if I can recall, one of the stated purposes was to provide emergency responder services.
That's why I want to go back and see what our rationale was in granting that variance.
That truck wasn't as heavy as this truck.
It may not have been, and that could be a distinguishing.
And although the gentleman had talked about getting a new truck, but that I believe was a 1-ton truck. This is over a 1-ton truck. This is not 450. The other one was about.
I would also say, as to, I understand the gentleman's, that he brought up the point, and it sounds like the last applicant did as well, about the efficiencies with having the vehicle parked in their home, and they're able to get to these service calls quicker. But just bringing it back to the actual area variance standard, I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say the benefit is like public safety. I mean, the benefit is the personal benefit to this applicant, which is the cutting off his commute time and gas money and things like that. So I wouldn't
I'm not
consider.
even sure it's a benefit to the applicant. It's definitely a benefit to the applicant's employer.
And I think
It's a
that's what also
benefit to-
distinguishes this from the the owner being the, owning his own business. There is some benefit to the applicant, of course. He doesn't have to drive to Gates, but yes, a substantial portion of the benefit.
Also helps with the security of his employment, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that they would change his employment because he couldn't take a truck home. That being said,
That's interesting. I wonder if it would be illegal for them to do that because
I would
they're
think so.
asking him to violate a law.
Right.
He probably could be protected against.
I don't know, I don't do labor law, so I wouldn't know about that.
But
He's probably at will somehow, some way, so.
This makes
Who
sense
knows?
to me to
Terminate someone
table
for
this, so we have an opportunity for somebody to really dig in it and understand it.
In whatever decision we come to, and I don't know what it'll be, nor do I even know after looking into it because I'm concerned about a proliferation of commercial vehicles as well. But I just want to make sure that we're on solid ground. Whatever we do is solidly based so that we're not, running the risk that we're going to incur thousands and thousands of dollars to the town in litigation to have a court tell us that we acted arbitrarily and capriciously and without a sound basis.
consider, I don't think a court would. I mean,
They have.
Well, I know they have, but again, going back to every application stands on its own.
It does.
I think,
This is,
I think on the principle of rather of being safe rather than sorry, I will second the motion that we table this.
I agree.
And do we want to specify in the motion the purpose of tabling it, what you're looking for in addition, any additional information you're looking for from the applicant in particular, or?
Well, I think what we're looking for, from the applicant, we need to know the actual weight of the vehicle as it's equipped, with the
Bucket.
bucket and the boom and everything. We need to know the weight. And I think that's all we need from the applicant.
Yeah, the proof of ownership is the other requirement, but I don't know if that's already
I
been
don't think
submitted.
that's really much in question.
it's not.
Written on the side.
Right. Proof
Yeah.
of the ownership is the company,
We'll
not.
take that over title.
Right.
Says it.
But it
Matter if they're owned by a leasing company?
I think the only difference is whether or not the resident owns it or some other third party.
I think so, too. I think that would be the distinguishing
Right, but
factor.
it's a third party.
Isn't the way the law's written, it's looking for ownership by the homeowner?
It does not say that explicitly. Again, it says that the
But I
the
think
vehicle
you're
is subject to
looking for a-
personal.
Looking for a gray area, the way I understand it versus the way it seems like it's written is it's the ownership of the guy that owns the home.
And I think that's a reasonable interpretation.
Right, so
And
why would we even consider the other one?
I'd like to know from our council, have there been other cases that have, other court cases that have dealt with this issue of restrictions on commercial vehicles and variances and this kind of, are there other cases out there?
I'm sure that this issue is not unique.
Well, that's
so-
what I was thinking. So, I mean, if there's, I know in the area of height restrictions in churches, there's a wealth of cases that says, nope, your height restriction caves in the face of a church. So, I mean, if there's something out there that
Yeah, there's definitely
is going
no.
to create a problem. Also, there's cases that talk about, restrictions on cell towers, not to bring up a bad subject, but there are those cases that I'm aware of, and
Yeah,
I
there's
think
unique
we need-
federal
Yeah.
federal legislation on cell
No.
towers.
I'd like to know, if you don't mind, if you
Yeah.
could look into that.
So the question is just, is there any difference in the way that you're supposed to be
Have
evaluating
the court
these
set up
types
rules
of
with
applications?
for commercial vehicles, yeah.
So, going back to the vote on tabling it.
Yes, that's the motion, is to table the,
For 1 month.
for 1 month to the October meeting.
If we table and the factors prove into the applicant's favor, we're still okay if we vote against having that type of a vehicle in the neighborhood.
Well,
Sure.
if it's determined that he doesn't need a variance, because that's the only way it would be determined in his favor without us granting
Yes,
it.
he absolutely does for ownership, but we're just going to get some clarification on that point.
In the
Give
event
us
that
an
it,
opportunity.
for some reason it was determined that he didn't need the variance, he'd just withdraw it and it would be it would die.
Okay.
So,
And if you're looking for clarification on the ownership issue, if that particular issue is really called into question, in the first instance, that's a code interpretation issue. So that would be on your code officer to say what that means. If the applicant, same process as any other interpretation, wants to appeal that, then that would get before this board. I mean, so I can't say, there's enough ambiguity that I can't say that when it says the occupants shall submit proof of ownership, that means proof that they own the vehicle, not just who owns this vehicle, because it's different in other sections of the code. Other sections of the code are more explicit, and they do say
But
that
I believe that applicants in general have an obligation to show ownership of the property. I'm sure that in the code there are other references to showing proof of ownership by applicants, and I'm pretty sure it has to do with their property.
it's in order to further an application, you either have to be the owner of the property or you have to have permission of the owner. So, if it's a Time Warner vehicle and Time Warner, I think it's a little different because it's a vehicle, not actual real property. But yes, you can be a tenant of a building and pursue an application if the owner approves it. Yeah.
Anyway.
is it, if the motion to table is passed, is it possible to request the code enforcement officer to be present in October?
Yeah, or ahead of time, you can get something in writing from him that says how he interprets this provision. And that would be the rule that you would go by unless it's appealed.
That would make sense.
All right, so on the motion to table, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Motion carries 6 votes in favor, 1 vote opposed, no abstentions, and we all are still present. 285 Winfield Road, this is a type 2 action for seeker purposes. Does anyone wish to make a motion with respect to this application?
I'll make a motion on Winfield Road. This is the front deck / porch.
Yes.
I would make a motion that we approve the deck as applied for. I don't believe it is a substantial change in the neighborhood because there are some other front decks in the neighborhoods, front porches. I don't believe it is an environmental impact on the neighborhood. I don't think it'll affect the environment at all. I believe it is a self-created issue because they want a little extra space for their growing family. I don't believe that we need to put some conditions on it, like we had spoke about adding a roof to it in a certain time frame. They did talk about adding a pergola. I believe that we could just approve the application the way it is, based on the criteria that's in front of us. Also, that the neighbors have a bunch of neighbors have signed saying they are very happy with the idea.
I would second that motion with 2 potential modifications. I would second it. I would add the additional finding that the applicant has indicated that they intend to make this a covered porch. And I think that is one of the factors that we did consider in potentially granting this application. I would also add the condition that the foundation be designed in a way that is sufficient to continue the construction to create a porch.
Well said. I'll agree to that.
I would also like to add that maybe something to color it, deck material in the front.
To match the house?
Something to blend into the house of some way, decking material to me in the front of the house it just looks in the wrong place. As a porch, in the neighborhood you go by, there are porches that cover, they got the spindles, they got the posts going up and everything, it blends in to the house instead of just sticking out, is pressure treated. I don't even know if they're doing pressure treated or not. I didn't really.
The one across the street is pressure treated
Treated,
lumber.
yeah.
It's just been done and it looks nice now, but in a few years, I wonder what it
Yeah,
might look
it
like
could be-
depending
Well,
upon how
if we
it's.
could put in there that if it's stained to match the trim of the home.
Make it
Yeah.
porch-ish.
Mm-hmm.
The piece about the intention to complete that. That doesn't necessarily stipulate that it would need to be finished as a porch, does it, though? It just means
No,
that the
it- no.
applicants.
Just says
all I
that
was
that
saying
was
is-
one of the
think that that's
factors that we
appropriate.
took into account. Is that, and they're going to, if we require that it be built in a manner that will support it, it allows a future homeowner to finish the porch project even if they don't,
And
because it's constructed in a way that would
Mine
allow
was
for
just
that.
to design it. My condition was, that point was raised as opposed to someone who said, I just want a deck, that's all that I want. You know, these people didn't say that. They said they intend to turn it into a porch. And I believe my condition was that the design be such that
It
it
would accommodate,
incorporates a foundation that is sufficient to support a porch.
I think that that makes sense, because I think that that is an important factor that the board did determine in coming to this decision, and this is a perfect example of something that the board would be able to, even though it's not a condition, to look back on this finding at a later date when you have other front yard deck applications, to say this one was a little bit different because the applicant was contemplating something more, and whether it happened or not, okay, but that was, part of your decision-making
Phase one.
process, so I think it makes sense
That
to
it was
reflect
also-
that in
and
the
it's
findings.
designed to match the color scheme of the house. Porch, so it's deck
So
porchy.
there were two conditions, right? Stained to match the exterior, and the foundation design is to be sufficient to accommodate a covered porch in the future. Those were the two conditions, right?
I
We
would,
discuss this?
Is
yeah,
there a
I would
second?
like you to consider adding open porch, because an enclosed porch looks way different than an open porch, especially because it sticks out so
All I
much.
said was covered porch.
Accommodate, yeah.
Yeah, but just for future understanding.
So, to
If that's
accommodate
the intention of the board, to say it's an
Open
open.
covered porch?
Right.
Okay. Yes, it's open for discussion.
I got the impression that these two people really don't know a whole lot about putting an addition on the house, whether it be a porch or a deck or whatever.
But they have a parent that is an architect.
And they're gonna have to
What-
submit plans to the
Okay,
town.
this is my problem with this, and this is why I'm going to be voting against this particular motion, because we are in effect acting as a building committee for this project. We're sitting here specifying all these different things. Now, to our credit, we're trying to help out neighbors, and I think that's an admirable thing. But I'm not so sure that's our role, because they need to, they had a good lesson tonight. They came in and they learned a lot, things they had no idea about before. Now, what they need to do is take that to an architect or to whoever they know and really design what they want and present that to the board. What they're presenting is like a skeleton, and they're expecting us to help them finish it off. And I don't, first of all, I personally don't feel qualified to do that. I mean, I've built things before, which are fine, but I'm not going to advise our clients, so to speak, what to do. But I do think there are professionals out there that should be consulted to keep the level, the grade, the upgrading of our neighborhoods in the hands of professionals, so that it comes out nice. Now, the guy across the street, I must have seen it, didn't impress me, did a good job. And we remember that, and I'd like to feel the same way about this place. But generally, a front yard deck has not been something that we look favorably upon, and here we are knocking ourselves out to try to make it work for them. And I think that's something that they should do, and come back in with a complete plan that we can approve or disapprove.
Well, but as zoning board members, aren't we here just to approve or disapprove the variance? So technically, we're only here to approve the size, dimensions, and the plan is up to them, and we can give them some suggestions on how it should look
Yes.
in our approval, but the overall design is theirs.
Yeah, and I think maybe the reason that the conversation got so involved in the design here where it typically wouldn't is because in this particular situation, the intended design was relevant as to whether or not you felt comfortable granting the variance. So saying, understanding that it's intended to be covered and that, the foundation will be built to accommodate a future covered porch and that it'll be colored in a certain way. You may not typically get into all of that with a deck because it's in an area where, you're not concerned about it, but it is appropriate to, put certain conditions on the look of it if those are offsetting sort of impacts that you're thinking that having a front yard deck, may bring about, like to Joe's point, that if you have a deck that looks like a backyard deck in the front of a house, that may not be great, but if it's painted and looks more like a porch, then you're more willing to grant the setback variance. So I think that's why the design was such an issue here.
If we were to grant this variance that they're asking for, which is just the front and side setbacks, and they were to turn to convert this porchy deck into a full porch, that would not require any additional variances.
That's correct,
So
if they're
all
within
we're
the
saying
setback.
is that whatever structure they do build can follow these dimensions. And then we're telling them that whatever structure they do build has to be designed in a way that will allow for a full porch and has to match the same color structure of the house as though a full porch is being built. But all we're saying is, yes, you can build in this little footprint as
Right.
long as it is designed to be a porch and it looks like a porch.
And then the rest is up to them. And of
And-
course, it
well-
would have to meet the code, the building department's gonna
Building
look at
permit.
it and make sure
Right.
that all of the, New York State code requirements are met before they're gonna issue a permit. You're gonna have a guy out there inspecting it to make sure that everything's,
Do they need another permit if they
Legal
cover it
conformance.
after the fact, though?
Well,
yes, and to add to it, they'd need another building, not another variance, but they'd
That's
need to pull another permit.
Building permit, okay.
and by saying that it's going to be sufficient to accommodate a
Future.
covered porch in the future, all we're doing is telling the building folks upstairs, make sure when you look at this, that it meets what it needs to meet in order to accommodate it. We're not telling them
Right.
how to build it.
Load
Or,
They
and
could
whatnot.
still change it to the
They could-
pergola and do something different without
Yeah.
us having to do anything.
right. You just need a permit from the town.
So in other words, like you said, our concern is the number of feet
Right.
of this variance. But it's not just that. We keep going back to what we're really trying to get accomplished here. And we are not in favor of a front yard deck. And yet that's really what's being proposed here. What we're trying to get around is that, we're in favor of a front yard deck temporarily because they're gonna change it to make it better, make it different.
But what if they don't?
I don't think that's the way to go. I think that
But-
the goal is
but
to get the plan.
You're mentioning that we're not in favor of front yard decks. There was a board member that used to be against front yard decks quite adamantly,
Yes.
but not all of us. That particular board member was not thrilled with them, but most of us over the years have gone along with front yard decks and thought they were quite nice. So if they're done nicely, if they're appearance nicely, I don't,
But to Russ's point, based on their testimony, if they wait one more year, they can do it all.
That was the point I was trying to make.
They
What's
just
your
wait one more
timeline?
year, they can have it all
You know,
done.
get it all
So,
together.
to Russ's point, we are bending, we are trying to manipulate the rules in a way that will accommodate this interest, but if other members of the board want to say, just wait a year, I have no problem with that.
Well, there was a time when the town zoning board looked with disfavor upon front porches and denied a number of front porches.
Front
That were-
porches or front decks?
Front porches that were applied for, yes, on the theory that if we let you do it, we'll have to let everyone do it. And now I think we've come around to the vantage point where most of us, at least, I think, say, well, front porches aren't so bad. It gets people out in the front of the house and gets them interacting with neighbors, which
agree.
improves safety and things like that. So I think, our thinking has swung around, and in terms of porches versus decks, yes, we had someone who much preferred porches over decks, and they certainly do look a lot better, but a deck nicely done, well-constructed, that's adaptable, I don't necessarily view that as being a negative in front of a house,
We have to
depending
make
upon how it's done.
we have to make sure that there's no change to the character of the neighborhood, and essentially by granting the variance for the for the deck, and then hopefully at some point you turn it into a porch, we're kind of allowing carte blanche for the roof and the rest of the structure. We're not approved. I'd like to see a whole plan here and say, this looks good, this is consistent with the character of the neighborhood, and we'll grant the setback variance. But I also like to be able to see what the idea for the roof and structure is, and know that, so we are going to grant, we may grant the setback variance, but know that there are no other impacts that may come across in addition to the variance required for the deck that would be a change to the character of the neighborhood. If we saw a complete plan, we could say, okay, well, it looks like the only change here is the setback, not also this deck, for all intents and purposes, on the front of the house. It's a porch, because we have a complete plan.
Well, and looking, and one of the things that I was looking at today when I was there and drove around is that there are a number of houses in their immediate area, in that immediate part of Winfield, that do have some kind of projection that's out in front of the house that is, if it's not a deck, it's a wide front entryway, or the one across the street with the pergola, or it's a porch. And so the neighborhood seems to be moving out away from the front of the house, not just, this isn't the first one. It may not be the last, but if it were the last, it's still not changing the neighborhood, as I see it.
That's what I heard this applicant say, is that it's a small house, and that
Yeah.
they want more square footage that is not dirt to live on. And that's why I think that granting the variance that allows them to build in this additional space would be appropriate.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So, the motion carries. 5 votes in favor, 2 votes opposed.
I thought it might.
Yes. And no abstentions, and we all continue to be present. I believe that concludes all the cases that are on our agenda, in addition to the agendas that we all received with the applications and the materials. We also received a copy of the
Yeah, I got it.
draft of the minutes for the August 3rd meeting. Did everyone receive those? Did everyone have a chance to review those? All right, I would move that we, did anyone have any corrections, additions, or other changes that they felt should be made to the minutes?
I won't be voting because I wasn't here, so.
Right. Anyone have any? All right, then I would move that we approve and adopt the draft of the minutes that was presented to us with the packets.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we have 1 abstention. So that carries. 6 votes in favor, 1 no opposed, 1 abstention, and we all are present tonight. We are adjourned.